Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Healing PlayHouse, a place where we nurture community, share truth, and discuss all things healing. I am your host, Edwina Nunez from Awaken Your Power. In this episode, I invited Jules Davis, a psychic, a medium, and an Usui Reiki master. Listen in as Jules describes what intuition is and what are some of the things that you can do to deepen your connection to intuition. After the episode, stay tuned as I share some insights in regards to what came up for me during this episode, before, and even now. I hope that what we share resonates with you as you navigate your own healing journey. And without further ado, I welcome you to the Healing Playhouse.
Right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Healing Playhouse. So today I'm super excited to have Jules Davis with me. I feel like it's going to be a very magical episode. So Jules Davis is a psychic, a medium, an Usui licensed Reiki master, sound healer, crystal healer. I'm probably just going to let Jules introduce herself because I feel like the list of her gifts is extensive. So Jules, if you can introduce yourself, tell us who you are. What do you do and who do you work with?
Sure. I am a licensed Usui Karuna and Animal Reiki master with the International Center for Reiki Training. I'm also a psychic medium, medical intuitive. Jeez, I can't even remember all the things that I do. I teach crystal healing. I'm a master crystal healer, a sound healer, and I own a business in the Los Angeles area called Oralux, where I work.
Awesome. Thank you. Who do you primarily work with in your business? So who I guess comes to you primarily? Anyone, or just do you work with a
Oh,
specific population?
people from all walks of life. Yeah. From the average person, which I wouldn't say they're average in any way, to celebrities, all over the map. I work with lots of different people. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And yeah, so I've known Jules now for a year and a half. And although we've never met face to face, a lot of our work has been virtual. I do feel like my intuition guided me to you. I was in a time in my life where I really needed some internal guidance. If you listen to episode number 1, I did go through my journey through betrayal trauma. And after I went through that failed disclosure and first polygraph, I did have kind of an internal kind of nudge to go inward and higher. I had been working more on just safety. And when that happened, I really felt the need to go in and then just go higher. So I started looking up like Reiki meditations, and that's how I found you. You were doing a new moon and full moon meditations, and they were so just really helpful to me. And then you mentioned that you were running a 12-week intuitive development course. And I'm like, you know what? I need that, because clearly my intuition should have told me something was going to go wrong. So either I'm not listening or paying attention, or I need to hone that in. But my understanding of intuition, I think, was very linear and superficial. And I think for most people, unless you've actually in the spiritual community, I think that is the understanding. I think oftentimes when you think of intuition, you think it's that voice in the back of your head, or that gut feeling that's going to tell you when something's wrong. So intuition comes in when there's danger, is your spidey sense. And that was my understanding of it. So I signed up for your course. And on the first day, when you talked about we were going to be doing some psychic readings, I'm like, what the? I am not a psychic. I don't know how to do that. So anxiety kind of crept in. But I stuck with it. I'm like, I signed up, I'm here. And I have to say that it was the most magical 12 weeks. I think my growth, my expansion, my understanding of what intuition is. How does my intuition speak to me? How is this something that I don't have to just kind of tap into when there's danger approaching, but in all facets of my life? Like, it was just an extremely magical experience for me. So before we dive into talking about your journey, can you, I guess, define what intuition is? Like, how will you describe that to someone?
Yeah, I would say intuition is like the power or faculty of attaining information from a non-logical or non-evidential reasoning. So we obtain information through different senses that we have. Everybody has an intuition. So regardless of how developed you are, we're working with our intuition every day, not just in, the spidey sense kind of way, but people tend to think oh, my intuition is only active when I get this feeling. Yet we can get it through other senses. We can have a knowing of something. We can see things internally through our mind's eye. We can hear things. We can have all different kinds of experiences. So it's really like coming in a very strong insight that we receive that doesn't seem logical. That would be this easiest way, I guess, that I'll describe it for you.
Thank you.
And
No,
except it's perfectly logical.
exactly. Logical by whose definition?
Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And like you said, it can come in different ways. Yes, it's understanding how does it speak to you the most, and how to, I guess, develop other ways of coming in. I know for me, it's that internal kind of strong knowing. It's not necessarily a voice, it's just a knowing. And for me, I had to decipher when it's intuition and when is it fear, when is it triggers. So also understanding when those different things are speaking up.
Yeah.
So I guess, can we dive into how did you connect with your intuition? How did you begin to tap into and understand that you had an intuition or a strong connection to it?
Well, I don't remember a time that I didn't have it, except for I just didn't really understand it when I was a little girl. So I started having experiences with spirit and also just knowing things. Um, I would sit and try to mind read people when I was a very, very young girl and just like pick up on things that they might have been going through. I didn't necessarily know if I was right or wrong sometimes, but I would just see somebody walking by and I'd be like, oh, I wonder what they're thinking. And I would just tune into them and all these images or different experiences, I would have those. So I started experiencing this very, very, very young. I just didn't know exactly how to work with it at that age.
Was that ever nurtured for you, like through your caretakers, your parents, or was this something that you were just kind of experiencing on your own?
Well, I feel very lucky that my mom was very open about her abilities. So it wasn't something that I necessarily, there was no like religious thing in my house where we weren't allowed to tap into that or something like that. I was nurtured in that way. She was very flamboyant, my mother, and into all this stuff. Both my parents, we went to astrologers and psychics and mediums and yoga workshops and retreats since I was a really little girl. But I didn't get taught how to work with it exactly. So I didn't really understand it. So it still frightened me, even though it was something that was acceptable, in my house or nurtured in a way. I didn't learn how to work with it until I was in my 20s.
And you said it frightened you. What did you find frightening about it?
Not necessarily my intuition frightened me. It was more the spirit world and just having experiences with spirit that was more frightening for me. Which for me, intuition is all of it. Different people might separate intuition, psychic, mediumship. For me, that is part of my intuition is
Mm.
awake and available to connect with spirit as well. I'm using the same senses, so to speak. So having experiences with spirit when we grow up in a world that typically makes the spirit world very scary. All of the horror movies, the ghost shows, everything is like fear, 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 fear. And it can be quite startling also to feel things that don't belong to you. So
Mm.
when I was a kid and well into my 20s, I was afraid mostly because of my experiences with spirit until I really understood how to work with it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Because I know that for me, the last episode was actually on healing from spiritual trauma. And for me, coming into that first class, like part of it was anxiety and fear. I'm an overachiever, so I always want to do everything right. So for me, it's like you're asking me to do a psychic reading. I don't know how to do that, so I'm going to fail. But then the other side of that was that I grew up in a religious kind of household, right? And when you heard about psychics, it's like, well, you don't do that because they're tapping into like, the devil or that kind of energy to get this information. So they give it to you. Like it's not really tied to more like God or that kind of light energy. So that was kind of also something that popped into my head that first class, but I've done enough kind of work to kind of navigate that. So when you say spirit, can maybe explain to our audience, who's not necessarily versed in the language, like what do you mean by when you say spirit?
Sure, and I just apologize because there's gardeners who have arrived here, so
Can't hear
let me
anything.
know if you can hear it. Okay. Spirit is some people refer to it as the other world, the unseen world, where people go when they transition, although it's more than just that. It is the non-physical realm that exists around all of us. So we live here in the physical world. We have physical experiences. We can also have spiritual experiences as humans. They're having a spiritual experience every day because they're not in a physical body. And that can be our loved ones who have transitioned out of a physical body. That can be our spirit guides or other illumined beings, spiritual beings, um, ascended masters, angels, all of those kinds of things. That's the spirit world to me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So you said that you didn't really type into how to work with your intuition or really develop it into your 20s. Did something happen that maybe nudged you to look into it more and develop it rather than being afraid of it?
I think it just got so loud, I couldn't ignore it. There was years where I would just not be able to sleep at night because there was so much activity happening, and it was usually other people's loved ones that were coming to visit me to like try to get messages to them. Like I used to live in this big apartment building, and when my neighbor, who was a friend of mine's mom, passed away, I started having experiences with her on a regular basis. And then her grandma started coming in with her mom, and they would give me information. And what I realized later was happening is that because I wasn't using it in my day-to-day life, it was affecting me at
Mm.
times when I was more accessible. But I had such bad insomnia and I couldn't sleep because I was having these experiences that were startling. I also had a lot of experiences in my dreams that were precognitive, meaning I would dream about something before it would happen or sometimes as it was happening. And that could also be startling. And eventually I realized, no, this is a benefit to me, like learning about things. I probably wasn't the easiest person to date because I'd receive any kind of information, through my dreams if I wasn't paying attention during my waking state. And I would receive a lot of information through my dreams, and I'd be like, who's Kristen? And they're like, what? Well, I had a dream, and I was always right. So yeah, it was just something that it was getting so loud I couldn't ignore it. And then my mom, when I was 27, my mom passed away, and I think at that stage it just having experiences with her after she transitioned, and then everything just went up even higher. Like my everything got turned up louder. I was having more and more and more experiences. And so I just decided, instead of being afraid of it, that I was going to learn how to understand it and work with it so that I could help people
Mm.
instead of it being just this thing that I was experiencing all the time, and the weirdo, telling people about dreams or whatever, things that were happening to me.
Right, because it wasn't going to go away. Yeah, so
No.
thank you for sharing that. I remember we had a conversation. I've done a couple of psychic readings with Jules, and I always feel like she's looking into my soul when she does them. And I recently was like, Jules, I keep getting stuff around dreams. Like, I need to learn more about dreams. And you're like, it's intuition talking to you. You need to just connect to your intuition. So, yes, I do feel like when I'm having active dreams, it's like, yeah, I need to go inward and connect with myself. So another thing that I guess I wanted to explore when you're saying, you're getting messages when you're either dating or relationship with someone. So how do you manage that? Because if you're constantly tapped into all these energies and different things, how are you in relationship with individuals when you might know more than what they're telling you?
Yeah, well, I definitely am not looking like I'm in a live-in relationship right now, and I'm never tuning into him intentionally.
Mm,
Sometimes I might get a little feedback just as, if we were hanging out and you were in a mood or something, I would be sensitive to that. But
okay.
I now know how to be more disciplined about that. And I feel like in the past, I was not necessarily intentionally tuning in. I was getting the information through my senses or from my spirit guides or whatever way you want to look at it in order to help protect me. So sometimes when we're not actively tuning in, we get messages to try to give us, information that would be beneficial for us. But I wasn't necessarily actively tuning in. I think of it as like I want my intuition to be on all of the time for myself in case I need it, but I don't want to be tuned into people. So I don't want to just walk around feeling everybody's stuff all of the time.
That's a lot.
I don't want, yeah, it would be
Yeah.
a lot. And before I understood how to work with it, I would just feel everybody's stuff. I was like a sponge, just absorbing everybody's energy, everybody's stuff. And it was really hard on me and my physical body and all different kinds of situations that I was experiencing because it was hard for me to distinguish what was mine and what was theirs. And so it is good to have a healthy boundary around your intuition when you're in relationship with somebody. But, I wouldn't beat yourself up about not having seen some signs in your situation because obviously you were functioning and trying to do all of the things that you were doing in your life and being a mom and a wife and working and all, it's like there's not always time to be aware of everything, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think in hindsight, you probably did see things that you just brushed under the rug. So it's not that you weren't paying attention, it was just easier to not pay attention at some
Right.
point. Most people will say, like, how did I not see that? But then when you really reflect, you're like, oh, yeah, there were some feelings I was having here and there. But you just kind of go, well, I'm not going to, I must be crazy. Or they tell you that you're crazy when you like say something to them. They tell you that you're crazy. So then you stuff it under too because you don't want to be crazy or you don't.
Mm-hmm.
Women are also taught to please and we're not supposed to start, you know, be confrontational or whatever. So oftentimes we also squish our intuition down a little bit because we don't want to get into an altercation with somebody or whatever it is. There can be lots of different reasons for why we don't present information to somebody or why we don't trust our own intuition when we're having those experiences.
Right, for sure. I
I
think
think I
women.
went off
No, 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 not at all. You went with
off
whatever
track
came
there,
through.
but
No, I think you went with whatever came through, resonated with me, and I'm sure it will resonate with many folks, that are listening because, yeah, women for sure, we are conditioned to not speak up, to not create conflict, to not ruffle feathers, to not make others uncomfortable. Oftentimes, we're made responsible for the other person's feelings rather than really honoring our own. But I think even as a society, right, we are just afraid of conflict. So we rather just kind of go with the flow and not challenge. And if your challenge is coming from a place of aggression and yeah, so I think everything that you're saying really resonated. As you were describing that you're connecting to information and not people, it made me think of empaths, right? Like folks who identify themselves as empaths, it's you feel energies, you feel other people's gunk, like you said, or stuff or feelings. So would you say most empaths are intuitives? I guess everyone has an intuition, but do empaths maybe have a higher connection to their intuition?
well, it's just a form, in my opinion, of your intuition being active. So empaths tend to be sensitive to especially the feelings and emotions of other people. And sometimes sickness, you can feel that in people too. So I am under the definition of what an empath would be, but for me that's just a branch of
Mm.
intuition. Clairsentience for me is something that's really strong, meaning those feelings, sensations, etc., in empaths. So if you have that natural ability, you have some level of being an empath within you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I was having a conversation with someone this morning. We were talking about children, and she was sharing a story with me about her daughter, who in some ways kind of had a premonition of a fire. She went to go put her to bed, and her daughter was afraid that, Mom, what if a fire happens and I can't find you? And sure enough, later in the night, there ended up being a fire in the hotel that they were kind of sleeping with. So we were kind of talking about, as children, you're kind of born with that strong connection to your intuition. And then just depending on your environment and things that you experience and are things that validated for you, then maybe that distance creates between you and your intuition, not that you can't get it back. But yeah, so I don't know if you can maybe shine a light on that. But yeah, do kids have a stronger connection to intuition?
I mean, I believe so. And some are going to just be more sensitive, like we are. Some of us are more sensitive to it. We all have intuition and we all have access to our intuition, but some of us are naturally more in a
Mm.
heightened state of sensitivity. Same with children. But I do believe that children start off without the impediment that adults do. They haven't been trained out of it just yet. And so they naturally have this ability, which then sometimes life experience, household environments, cultural conditioning can tell you to turn it off, or it's not good, or it's the devil or Satan talking to you, or whatever it is. And then you start to not listen to it. Or some people don't want to listen to it because they've had a painful experience when it was true and that was sad for them. And so they'd want to turn it off because they don't want to receive those kinds of messages. That may be. And what I mean by that is like maybe there was disappointment, or maybe you had a feeling that something bad was going to happen and it happened. That can be quite scary, especially as a child, you know, if you have
Mm.
a precognitive experience and it comes true. So people turn it off or turn it down for all different kinds of reasons, and usually have to tap into it again at some point when they start to hear the calling for that, whether it's a traumatic life experience or it gets loud or whatever it is that they can't ignore it anymore.
Yeah, no, thank you. So going back to your journey, when you did decide that you wanted to develop it a little bit more, I guess, can you maybe walk us through some of the things that you did, or what are some of the things out there for someone who wants to develop or connect to their intuition?
Yeah, I think that it's important to just start listening to that inner voice or the inner guidance, your inner compass. You know, it could be as simple as where to look for parking or where to turn down a road, or, you know, just when there's safety stuff involved, like we talked about earlier. But there can also be meditation, I feel, is a way that you can access your intuition and start to build a greater intention of connection with your spiritual team, the people in spirit that help us, or the beings in spirit that help guide us. There's also, in my opinion, a need for some active development, like the class that you took, with whether it's with me or somebody else, but just somebody that can help to nurture you and give you some guiding light of how to work with it. Because for me, my intuition was naturally there, but I didn't know how to tap into it or access it. And the exercises and actually doing work with it helped me just in my day to day life. It's like, regardless if you want to be a professional psychic or a medium, it will just help to give you more access to things. So you can try to do exercises on your own. You can practice automatic writing, which is a style of channeling through the written word. But meditation, automatic writing, those are things you can do on your own. The other things I would suggest, if you're really serious about developing, is to take a class or a workshop and see how it feels to open up a little bit more and tune into all the senses.
Yeah, no, thank you. How has your life transformed since you developed your intuition, or not? I wouldn't say you master your intuition. I don't know if there's such a thing, but you definitely have a very strong, yeah, developed intuition. How has your life changed?
I feel like it's just given me a greater understanding of what my purpose is here
Mm.
on this earth. I was always really interested in being a nurturer. I just have a natural nurturing ability, wanting to help people. Um, and so, you know, there were times in my life where I just had a household of strays, and I mean humans, of like taking care of people all the time. But I often overextended myself and, you know, just did things that weren't necessarily taking care of me. And so I started developing my intuition and learning different healing modalities and tools. And suddenly I had this constructive way of helping people And it ended up being so life-changing, it became professional as well. And so I'm really grateful that it took me onto this path of professionalism and a way of really every day I get to help people for my, how I earn my living. I think there's nothing more rewarding for me than that. So I'm very excited about it. Plus, it helps me in my everyday life. Like I said, just finding a parking spot or whatever, I'm like, which way should I go? You get these messages and just follow your intuition. You can do that. That's another way of developing your intuition. Try to go to Costco, go shopping. They're always changing stuff around. Where is that stuff? Find where they've moved the cereal or whatever it is, just with your intuition. It sounds silly, but it is stuff that you can use in a very practical life, day to day kind of a way. Or, often we'll think, like, I don't really want to go out tonight with that person, or I'm just feeling more comfortable staying home. And you kind of put that thought out there, and then suddenly you get the call, like, I have to cancel or whatever, those kind of things. And it's like, yes, not that I didn't want to see the person, but I was just like not in the mood that day. And, it can work in that way where they're kind of feeling your thoughts, I think, or something. Maybe you're preemptively feeling that it might change. And so you're kind of getting the thought within you of something. It's okay if something changes. I don't know if that makes sense, but that kind of stuff can happen. Or I used to get this all the time where, like, I just wouldn't know. I would start thinking of somebody and they'd call you, or you'd run into them. Somebody you hadn't seen for years, suddenly they pop into your mind, and you know, you run into them out of nowhere, kind of thing. Like, those kind of things can happen. Just pay attention to the synchronicities that are happening in your life with that kind of stuff, and you'll
Yeah.
see that your intuition is there working.
No, thank you for sharing that. And like I said, you're expanding on where we started, where, again, that linear thought is just that intuition is just there to just there when the danger is up, but the fact that you can use it in your everyday life, as you're talking, it is making me also think of manifestation. There's a lot around manifesting things. Is there a difference between like using your intuition and manifestation? Are they the same thing?
Well, it's all energy to me. Working with our intuition is energetic. Manifesting something comes through our senses. And actually, if you look at the chakra system, where we manifest is through our solar plexus, which is where our clairsentience lives. So it's all interconnected, in some way, energetically, spiritually, or otherwise. Manifestation, usually our intuition might guide us to want something, or to desire something. And then we open up, and tune in, and we might listen to our intuition for how do we have access to that thing to bring it into our life, if that makes sense. Or we might also access our intuition with manifestation when we're choosing which teacher to study with, or which job to take, or, all of those different things. So there is an interconnectedness between the two, I believe.
Got it. So it's kind of tuning into your intuition to understand perhaps what it is that you need to be in alignment with where the path you're meant to go, or to align with your higher self, and then manifesting it to kind of bring it into fruition.
Sure. Yeah, you can look at it that way. Your it's a good way of making it more linear in the style of
Like, that's one way of saying it.
No, it's great. It's great because, we all think in different patterns
Right.
and different styles.
Yeah.
And so we all have different personalities as well. And so we don't all have to be carbon copies of each other. And it's also easy to break it down and simplify it like you did in that
Yeah.
way. That's great because some people might understand that better than the way that I just went all woo-woo-y.
Not movie at all. No, and I certainly have experienced that, where it's like when I'm in that space of, I have a very strong connection because I've either been really doing the work and I feel like I'm in that space, And then it's almost like, yeah, either I have a park that I go to that it's like, I call it my spiritual vortex because I just step into the park and kind of, I step into myself, like my higher self. And I'll just go out there and I'll talk, like I'm talking to the sky, I'm talking to the trees, and wherever that frequency is, whether it's aligned to love, dating, a job, or just something that I calling in, but calling in from a place as if it's already there and it's just within time I'm going to reach it. And I've seen things just kind of come to me. So that's where I guess, yeah, it's tuning into that intuition to understand like what it is that I need, and then kind of then stepping into that to call it
Yeah.
in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, calling it in. It's also interconnectedness. The more we are awake and aware of everything around us and how we fit in and connect to everything around us, the more we have access to our intuition because we're so aware. You know, if you're walking through life like this, it's going to be harder to access all of the resources that are available to you because you're not aware of everything happening around you and how everything is interconnected. There's like a domino effect. Um, you can look at it through physics or through intuition and energy, whichever way you look at it. Everything is interconnected and has an effect on something else.
Yeah, for someone who is walking around like that, which I think it's the majority of folks. I mean, I know when I took your course last year, it was during a very difficult period in my life. And I was very guarded because I had to be because of the situation that I was in. So even though I had you, very skilled teacher and very structured, not structured, but guided way of connecting with my intuition and doing exercises, I feel like I would be able to sustain it for just a minute or two, like blend in, hear things coming in, share with my partner. They could validate it, but then things were closed down. It was really difficult for me to keep that channel open because I was very guarded. I would love to take that course again now that I'm in a different space because I could probably, continue to expand. But yeah, for someone who is kind of guarded and just maybe going through some gunk or just, blinders are on, how do you begin to open that up to be more aware?
Well, I think it starts with just giving yourself permission to be open. Everything is a choice.
Hmm.
Expanding our energy is a choice. Accessing our intuition is a choice. We have free will around all of that stuff, which is why we can turn it off and block it out, or we can open it up and access it more. So for me, I feel like regardless of what stage you come in, so for example, the experience that you just shared, you probably learned something from that and where you were at in your life around that, right? And sometimes people, when we go through really painful things, you don't want to feel, and you don't want to feel other people's stuff, and you don't even want to feel your own stuff, and you don't want other people to feel your stuff either if you're a
Yes.
private person. So it's probably you were keeping your energy very close because you didn't want to get into that more painful feeling of what you were going through at the time, which is quite natural. If you are somebody like me who works with it all of the time, I don't have the, I mean, I have the choice. I could just not work. But if painful things are happening in my life, I still have to learn how to work with it because I still have to do my job. And if you, Edwina, want to come to me for a reading and I just had the worst day ever, I still have to set all of that to the side and be
Hmm.
accessible for you and tune into your experience neutrally as best as I can and, give you a reading. So it's learning how to be okay and sit in your feelings and just be okay that they're there and existing with you. And that you can also, I like to, lately, I've been giving people permission to put their stuff in a box and put it to the side during class or during the meditation or whatever it is, because that can be a visual thing that can be helpful for people of like, okay, I'm going to put my junk to the side and be present. And now I have permission to open up because that stuff isn't sitting with me or on top of me. I can always get back into that stuff later. Right. But, I think we naturally all just need to survive or want to survive. These are coping mechanisms and tools that we go through because everybody's been through something painful. So if this is where you're at and you're limited by what's going on around you and you're feeling very protective, then you just start there. And as you awaken more on your spiritual journey and learn how to handle or process the painful things that you're going through, you can open up a little bit more. And then you continue to do that and you open up a little bit more. We're all healing. I'm still healing. I've had a lot of painful and traumatic things happen in my life, and I'm still, navigate through things that are actively happening in my life. And so we don't master our intuition, but we master our ability to work with it, or we learn better
Mm.
how to navigate it and understand it and process things. But even some of the greatest mediums from the day that I highly regard and respect said we're always evolving and learning. There's no top, you know? So we always have room to grow and expand and learn more, which is why I'm always interested in learning more and expanding more with my own senses and intuition.
Awesome, thank you. I love that idea. I have heard of that, and I think I've heard it as an energetic container. So kind of like putting your stuff in this kind of container. And to your point, I think, yeah, just giving yourself permission. Yes, this stuff is here, but for this moment in time, I can just kind of set it aside and put it to rest and focus on the here and now. And then, if I want to pick it back up, I can pick it back up. It's not gonna go anywhere. But yeah, so I love that idea. Yeah, so thank you so much, Jules. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to share with our audience, but I think, that how you ended, yeah, I think that for a lot of people, I mean, like I said, our awareness are just with whatever we're going in at the moment. So I think that ability to just work little by little and expanding and giving ourselves permission to, yeah, kind of sit with the feelings. That's something that I'm working with now, is just sitting with those uncomfortable feelings and increasing tolerance and seeing them as visitors, observer. Okay, sadness, you're here. Sit down at the table. Let's have some tea. Tell me what's going on. Because I think before it's just trying to shoo it out the door or run away from it or not sit with it, which then closes me off to other things. Because what I've learned is that I can't just close myself off to this feelings or this experience without closing myself off to some other things. So yeah, that ability to remain open with whatever is coming through.
Yeah, that's that interconnectedness. Whereas one thing that's happened in our life has an effect on something else, even if we don't always draw a neat line between the two. And that's the energy and how it affects us. So I would just encourage people, if they want to access their intuition, to start slowly and start where they're at. And then you can always expand more upon that as you grow and learn and start to understand a little bit more about yourself. But it is very much a self development journey that goes with that. And as you learn more about yourself, work more on yourself, you will have greater access to your intuition.
Awesome, thank you. And Jules, for our audience, where can they find you? I know we've been talking about this intuitive course. If you want to tell us a little bit more about that or share, yeah, where our audience can
Sure.
find you.
Yeah, I am available for online and in person training experiences for intuitive development. I have in July starting just a 4 week summer course for beginner intermediate students. And then in the fall, starting in September, I have another 12-week. That one's more of an intermediate advanced. If I can find another time in my schedule, I might do another beginner intermediate in the fall. But Healing with Jules, www.healingwithjules.com is my website, and my classes and information about my sessions and everything is there.
Thank you. I'll definitely add that to the channel. And just one ending question, what would be the difference between, I guess, beginner intermediate and intermediate advanced, just for anyone who might be interested in either or?
Beginner intermediate is somebody that is just starting to get their feet wet or getting a little bit more comfortable with getting their feet wet. Intermediate advanced is somebody who is very comfortable with knowing that they have the ability. It's not necessarily that you're an advanced student and you can give, extended readings, but more that you're comfortable, you know how to connect and access those things, and you want to greater expand that connection and push yourself further.
Got it. Thank you. And I would definitely say whether you are looking to do this professionally, provide psychic readings, or if you're just looking to just develop it for yourself, either two reasons, are great to take a course like this, either Jules or someone else. But I took up Jules and highly recommend her. I think she's amazing. Just your energy is just amazing. You're very gifted. So yeah, I would definitely drop your information in the YouTube channel, and hopefully folks can find you. You're also still doing the new moon and the full moon Reiki meditation. So Jewel does host 1 hour meditations twice a month, more or less, which are free as well. So those are great too.
Yeah. Yeah, the courses are for a fee. The meditations are free, so they're available to everybody. And just to have an experience and going through that healing process can help you to access your intuition as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jules. It's been a pleasure to have you join us.
Likewise. Thanks, Edwina.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Healing Playhouse. I do hope that the information that we shared today brought some new awareness, some new knowledge to the table for you as you navigate your own healing journey. So yes, like I said in the intro, I wanted to share a little bit more what was going on for me leading up to this episode, during, and even now. I recorded this episode close to 3 weeks ago, and me sitting on something for more than a day or two, it's a new thing. In my day-to-day job, I'm actually a project manager, and I have built a very successful career in getting things done, moving things along. I'm very good at bringing in the analytical and the human side and really creating balance to move things along and creating outcomes very swiftly. So an innate part of me is to really get things done and put things out there very quickly. So the fact of me really listening to myself or my intuition, feeling the need to just sit with this was part of me certainly listening to my intuition. So the days leading up to my episode with Jules were some heavy days for me. I was going through just experiencing a lot of grief and a lot of sadness. And not to say that I haven't experienced that before. I think sometimes when it comes in that strongly at this present time, sometimes can be a bit surprising because you can question and be like, I thought I was over certain things. But it's realizing more and more that grief, it's a process, and healing from betrayal trauma, it's complex. I think whenever you have a loss, relationship, divorce, family, there's loss in that, and divorce in and of itself brings a lot of grief. But then when you have the layer of betrayal trauma and sex addiction, it is very complex because you often find yourself missing a relationship, and then you have to question, like, what am I really missing? This person caused so much hurt, so much deception, so much toxic. Am I really missing that? And then in some ways, in order to counterbalance that, you have to remind yourself of the things that you were put through. And that can create a very vicious cycle, because then you're stuck between feeling sadness and then feeling shame over missing that, and then feeling anger because you have to remind yourself of the difficult situations that this person put you through. But what I'm learning more and more is that grieving, it's a natural process. And at the end of the day, whether this person, did what they did, I lived in that relationship for 15 years. And it was a relationship where memories were created and milestones were achieved. And we built an entire life together. And whether that person that showed up in the marriage was a real person or not, it is natural to grieve that. And in some ways, I sometimes call it grieving the illusion, which sometimes can even be more confusing, because you're almost grieving something that perhaps didn't truly exist. But at the same time, you're grieving what you thought you had. You're grieving what you feel that you should have because of how hard you worked. You're grieving what, should be. It's a lot. And then also when you divorce, you lose that sense of family, right? Not having the same community, not having the same connections, not having the same supports. So it can get very layered and very complex. And what I'm learning more and more is that when those feelings come up, it's just really intuition nudging me to pay attention to the parts of me that really just needs nurturing and really needs attention and really needs me to just sit with it. Sometimes, the ego can be very tricky. And when those feelings come up, you think maybe you're not doing enough. Maybe I need more meditation. Maybe I need to journal more. Maybe I need another support group. I'm not doing enough of something. And that's why this is coming up. And oftentimes we can get tricked into a spiritual bypass. And that is the ego. Ego wants us to move through these feelings very quickly, whichever way possible. So it will adapt. It will bring in things to get you to not sit with feelings. But the way our intuition works is that it will not just in different directions, it will bring things up, not just things that feel good, but also things that will push us to grow more, push us to be more in alignment with our higher self. And sometimes that can come up in the form of uncomfortable feelings. So in the episode, I knew that these feelings for me were at the table. I think I was coming out of it. I wasn't feeling them as strongly as I was a couple of days, before the episode. But me knowing Jules and just how skillful she is, I knew that she could feel that. I knew that she could tap into it. And I was holding back. I really was wanting to not allow her to feel that because I wanted to just do the episode. I was very excited about this episode. So yeah, part of me was very guarded. And as you can see throughout the episode is shorter than the other episodes I've done. There were situations where I, instead of maybe having more conversation, asked questions because I wanted to move it along. But of course, she felt it. And when we closed the episode, she did very gently asked me about, a person in my life and how that was going. And which then opens up the opportunity for me to talk about where I was. And then, she very gently, gave me a reading in regards to blending in with that other person and giving me some guidance, which I think is guidance that just in relation to that particular situation, but just for me in general. When I'm going through a period that I'm feeling sad or feeling lonely, I close off because my entire life I have felt that way. So for me, it's like, well, the only person that has ever truly been there is myself. So I do tend to just go inward and close out. So she was just, giving me some guidance in that, tapping into my higher self and asking me to open up and allow in, even in those difficult situations, because that's when it's harder to do it. But it was a reminder, again, some of the things that we talked about in the episode, that when we close ourselves off, we are putting those blinders on and, in some ways can disconnect ourselves from our intuition. So it's really in those difficult moments to staying curious, staying open, being aware, why is this showing up and what is my intuition pushing me to learn? So in regards to where I am now, those feelings, are still there, not as strongly as they were, but I know that sometimes they'll come back around and that is okay. And again, that is just intuition really nudging me to the parts of myself that I really need to work through and really diving in deeper, because I know those feelings aren't just in relation to the end of my marriage, but really feelings and emotions that stem from way before that. Oftentimes, we are conditioned to find ourselves in particular relationships because of things that we learned, in childhood or from our primary caretakers. So just wanted to share a little bit of insight that healing isn't always linear. Healing isn't always pretty. Can be challenging, but even in the challenging there's a lot of learning to be had. So thank you again for listening to this episode. And if this episode and the other ones that I've done, are resonating with you, please subscribe, please like, and please share, because as I always say, healing does happen in community. And if there's an episode, a topic or a tool that you want me to bring to the Healing Playhouse, please drop it in the comments. Hopefully this can be a community that we create together. So until next time, keep healing. Much love, Edwina.